And
Hello.
We're live.
Welcome to our lovely bonus class called Boundaries and Relationships. I am Debra Berndt Maldonado, and
I'm Dr. Rob.
And we are the co-founders of CreativeMind and the developers of the CreativeMind Method. And we are so excited to do a bonus training here in our Love and Purpose group because this topic is probably one of the biggest topics that we ever have to deal with in relationships, whether you are dating, whether you're in a relationship, whether you're at work, is boundaries. And those of you who are listening, there is a link to the handout. So if you have a chance, go, it's in the thread, go look for it. It says handout, click on that link and it'll take you to a page you can view it and follow along with us.
Yep.
And also, I just want to mention, if it comes up small, if you scroll down, there's a little plus and minus. You can make it bigger. So if you want to read it more, the Dropbox will help. So welcome, everyone, and we're really excited to be here. So what are boundaries, Rob? And let's start with what are healthy boundaries?
Yeah, well, it's one of those topics that we all need to learn, and we all assume that we know. Mm-hmm. But very few people really talk about boundaries and how to set boundaries, what they are, what's their usefulness, all those things. So we wanted to introduce you to the topic the way we think about it, mm-hmm. because we have our unique way of doing things, and we've always had that. And you might as well get used to it if you're going to be in the group. So it's a good way to introduce the way we see the mind, the way we see the work with coaching and psychology, and boundaries is a great place to start. I just want to add as human beings, you know, we are social creatures. If you don't understand human interaction in regards to boundaries, then you're always frustrated, you're always angry, you're always being triggered by other people because you feel they're overstepping their boundaries and mm-hmm. those kind of things. So we'll talk about some of those things.
And I want to say, you know, a lot of people, there's a big talk, like Brene Brown had a big TED talk about intimacy and boundaries. Oh, and I think, yeah, she's really great. But one of the things that I felt like when I bought her books and read her stuff that was missing is that it was all about behavior change. That if you change your behavior or speak up and just do it, then everything's going to be okay. And there is some truth to that. If you change behavior, you are shifting. Sure. But we're going to go a little deeper tonight, and we're going to talk about, from a Jungian perspective, Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist from over 100 years ago. He died in the 60s, but he studied with Freud, and he talks a lot about the persona and the ego and really the psychology of what happens with our psyche, how we relate to others, how we project. And we're going to, you know, put Debbie and Rob's spin on this, CreativeMind spin.
Our own brand.
Yeah, so we're going to go a little deeper, so be prepared. This isn't going to just be go out and stand up for yourself kind of pep talk. We're going to go deep.
Right, so what are boundaries? Let's see, what are healthy boundaries? Yeah. And, you know, we were discussing this a little bit earlier. What is it, healthy or unhealthy? And it's not really about that, but it's really that just like physical health or mental health, there are optimal ways of being. And certainly if we think about optimal boundary setting, that's what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. That's what we mean by healthy boundaries. So feeling responsible for other people's happiness and success, that would be a lack of that healthy sense of boundary.
So for example, if you feel that whatever you do is impacting someone else's happiness all the time, then you are, and then you'll tend to not do what you want because you're putting them up on a pedestal.
Right.
How many have we done that in relationships?
Not me.
With family, with friends, with dates, you know, we're afraid to hurt their feelings. And so that's lack of boundaries, actually.
The inability to say no for fear of confrontation or rejection.
Ooh, that was me. Always afraid of that.
Yeah, that's a big one. We all are taught to be nice and to get along and all that stuff. And it becomes this unspoken taboo to step on anybody's toes, to say no to somebody. And a lot of people find themselves doing incredibly ridiculous things just because they can't say no, because they fear being rejected or they fear confrontation.
Well, the confrontation, for me, it was always, and you probably can relate to this, of someone getting upset and angry, or like where they would cause harm to you even. Like, it's not logical, you know, it's not rational, but it's that irrational, like they're going to harm me in some way or get even with me or do something bad to me if I don't follow their rules. And if you think about growing up, we were, you know, brought up in households where we were punished and rewarded based on our behavior. So we bring that punish and reward mechanism into our relationships as adults. And we tend to not want to punish others also. And then we also not want to get that punishment if we step out of line like we did. And then this one, you want to do this one? Sharing too much?
Sharing too much too soon, or fearful of expressing your wants and needs. So they're kind of related. They're, you know, the opposite sides of the same coin. You either share too much too soon, meaning you're kind of wearing your heart on your sleeve, and you're divulging too much too soon, meaning you're kind of dumping a lot of your emotions on the other person, or on the other hand, you're afraid to express what you want and what you need out of situations, relationships, etc. That is a sure sign that you need to work on your boundaries.
So it's like you're either giving too much or you're holding too much back. We either do those two extremes. And how do we share what we really feel through our heart in an authentic way? So what are boundaries? They're guidelines. They're rules or limits that we set in our life. And most of us, it's almost like assumed, these boundaries, that we look at our family or growing up and what they thought was right, what your mother said, please don't make anyone mad at you. Don't let anyone, you know, don't embarrass yourself. Those kind of, don't ask for too much, or whatever those messages were. We tend to think, well, that's really how the boundaries are. We assume that everyone is playing by the same rules. And then we end up being, we don't really have an understanding of where that limit is. I mean, I've done relationship coaching for over a decade, and everyone always asks me, is it okay for me to ask for this? Is it okay for me to say no to this? We tend to not become unsure of what those rules are and what our limits are, what our boundaries are. And then also we assume that the other people know our limits and boundaries, and they're stepping all over my boundaries. And I always say, you don't have any if they're stepping over it, because it's something we need to communicate. It's not something that we all have signed up for the same boundary school. As you know, you'll be in a very public place, and everyone will be playing by the rules. Go to the airport, you'll think about boundaries right there. Who follows the rules? Who cuts? Who doesn't? Who gets, you know, goes into the line before they call the number? You know, some people don't have those kind of play by the rules limits, and then there's people like me that are like, follow the rules. If they didn't call your number yet, you're going to sit behind and wait. And then we get irritated when other people don't, and we just assume that they have all those same rules.
Yes. So now the other function they provide is that they give people a reasonable, safe, and permissible way for them to behave around you. Mm-hmm. In other words, they set the rules, the limits, what's acceptable and what's not, what's proper and what's not. And because we all come from different backgrounds, different family systems, and different cultures sometimes, we all have different rules in our mind as to what is appropriate behavior. And if we're not able to identify those things and express them, then that's when we feel like you were saying, that people overstep their boundaries and we're triggered often. And we don't know how to say it, and then we're afraid to confront them. You know, I wanted to ask you and share that as a child psychologist for many years, you said that kids actually thrive in a structured environment where they know what the rules are. And if you don't know what the rules are, it feels very insecure. You feel very insecure because you don't know. And so those of you who may have been single for or married for a long time, and then you're back out in the single and dating, or you're starting, a new business and you're interacting with people, and
you don't know where those boundaries are. And so it's like, it would be nice to define them. And truly, the best boundaries that you follow are the ones you set yourself. You have to make a decision for yourself, and we'll get into that later. But most of us, we don't have those definitions of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. How many times, I know for me, when I was dating, I would always compromise. You know, I wanted a spiritual guy, but I always would go out with someone, oh, he was good looking. So, oh, forget about the spiritual. Like, I didn't keep boundaries with what I wanted and what was acceptable. And how many of us do that? And then we are passive aggressive about it. We don't like say what we really feel, and we kind of not talk, or, you know, give hints.
Silent treatment.
Yeah, or silent treatment, or give hints. And that's how we kind of work around it and navigate it. And then also how you will respond when someone steps outside those limits. That's what we were just talking about, is do we shut down? Like, when I'm mad at you, I don't go, just leave the room and just not tell you. And you'd be like, what did I do? That's like maybe that's what happened in your family, and maybe that's how you learned how to communicate boundaries, just shutting down, or it's yelling, or it's doing something else, or it's banging things, or like that avoidance, or being super nice or manipulative. I mean, there's so many ways we do it. But how do you respond when someone steps outside your limits? So check in with yourself. What do you do?
Yeah.
Or you call your friends and complain about them, but you don't do anything about it.
Right. So Jung said this. He said, the world will ask you who you are. Meaning, when you go out into the world, the implied question is, who are you? And he says, if you don't know, the world will tell you. In other words, if you don't assert yourself and say, this is who I am and this is what I expect, then the world will determine what those boundaries are for you. And they'll hand you the script for you, meaning the limitations, the boundaries, the possibilities in your life. They're all going to be handed to you by the world, instead of you determining your own level of competency and boundaries and all that good stuff. So why do we need all these boundaries?
Why do we need them?
To practice self-care and self-respect, first of all.
This is setting boundaries. Is, if you want confidence, that's really where it comes from. It's to be able to, like, love yourself enough and honor yourself enough to say no to things and to ask for what you want. And that's what confidence is. Not that I'm a good person and I'm good enough. It's more, do I hold my own power?
Yes.
Another one is communicating your needs in a relationship, and make time for those positive interactions with people. Like, to have healthy boundaries means you're going to have more positive interactions with people, and you're not going to always feel like you're fighting with the world. How many have you ever been around one of those people? I'm sure none of you, because you're all like wonderful people, but you're around that person that's just always like kind of grating. You know, they walk into the room, or they're, you know, in a group, and they're like that one person that kind of grates and makes everyone triggered. You know, we want to have more positive interactions. We want to feel comfortable with each other.
Yeah, and in relationships, not just romantic relationships, but I think work relationships, friends, family. You know, we always say that, we kid around that if you ever run out of triggers, people emotionally triggering you, just go visit your family, and you'll come back with a lot of triggers. So before we go, there's two types of boundaries, just before we go into how to change them. The first one is physical boundaries. So we have a boundary of our space. So this is especially related to, the Me Too movement, and even dating, is that unwanted touching, sexual advances. You know, where if someone is coming on to you or saying sexual things, a lot of people ask me, what do I do? You know, how do I say this? Here I go again. Yeah, she's triggered already.
Sexual advances I'm getting.
Not only that, there's also, for example, looking through other people's personal files or emails.
Checking their phone.
Yes, people overstep their boundaries. Not allowing others their personal space. Now, this is particularly relevant to relationships, obviously. Couples need to allow for that personal space, right? I mean, you give me personal space, which is, incredibly generous because it's comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way for people to allow each other's growth,
Mm-hmm.
but still be in an intimate relationship.
Well, sometimes too, people will tell us that someone's coming on too strong, and they're constantly texting you and calling you and wanting to be with you all the time. And if that's that personal space, it's like, wait a minute, I need some time with my girlfriends, or you're coming out, or maybe you're the one who's always wanting to be in their space. So you want to kind of remember that you need to communicate those things. What's the expectations? And then emotional boundaries are a different type of boundary, and that's this is really important, not being able to separate your feelings from other people's feelings. Especially in a relationship, we have this thing that we resonate with other people. So if they're angry or agitated, it affects our emotions. If they're happy, it affects our emotions. If they're depressed, it affects our emotion. And then we end up basically hooked into them, and that's where we don't feel that our emotions are separate. We don't have a boundary between ours and theirs. So if your partner or someone you're dating is having a bad day, they had a tough day at work, like you feeling like over-responsible, or you can't relax until they're happy again, or they're not making money and they're struggling and you're trying to help them, that's that kind of, you're stepping over, like it's a boundary, like it's you're feeling responsible for them. And you can't be responsible for anyone's happiness. They're responsible for theirs. Like Rob, I'm not responsible for Rob being happy. Rob has to find his own happiness.
You told me.
I mean, you want to give and make each other happy, and you want to support each other. But that when it's like my feelings, if he's fully responsible for my feelings, that's powerlessness. And so we want to separate our feelings from their feelings. They're two different things, and they don't have to be. And we do kind of feel like we resonate. When a room is happy, we tend to be happier. When a room is sad, we tend to be sad. So we as a social creatures, but we have to remember where the definition is between us and them, so we're not riding the wave, right?
Yes, this is a good one. Sacrificing your plans, dreams, and goals in order to please others. That, often you might think, well, that helps bond, kind of make the relationship work better, or there's less friction if you go along and go with the flow. But it doesn't, because what you're doing there is you're not respecting yourself. You're not respecting, kind of setting those healthy boundaries and respecting yourself. And self-respect is an essential part of a good relationship. You have to bring it. In other words, you can't expect the other person to give it to you. You have to bring it yourself.
When I was engaged back before you, I gave up I was going to do I was actually a massage therapist, and I was pursuing some kind of work helping others, and I gave that up to get into the corporate world. So the partner could go off and do what he wanted to do. And it felt really bad. Like I felt, and you end up resenting it. You end up resenting that and making them wrong, you want to do it, but then you resent it. So you're really not setting that boundary. So I ended up creating my own path from it, but you learn from those mistakes. And then also this one with boundaries is sometimes you're not taking responsibility for your own emotions, and you blame others for your problems. So that's kind of the same thing of you're responsible for their feelings, but you're also on the other end of the coin is you're making everyone responsible for your feelings. So this idea that the partner should know how to be, if you're sad, your partner should know and should be able to help you. Of course we want that, but if you don't communicate that and you just assume, and this is, I think, a lot what happens in relationships is that we assume they know what we're thinking. They're mind readers. And so we end up feeling like they should know better. They should be there for me. This happened and I should, I've heard that story so many times. This thing happened and he did this And why didn't he do this? And why didn't he do that? And did you ask him? No, but he should have known. I shouldn't have to ask. You know, we hear that. I shouldn't have to ask. And that's kind of, we get caught up in that, and then we blame them for not communicating our boundaries.
Yeah, those are part of cognitive distortions or cognitive assumptions that we make that people can read our mind, right? Like they should know without me telling them. But often people don't. You have to be able to express it. So before we get to the kind of the wrapping it up, are we going to take some questions?
Well, we're not even wrapping it up. We have a couple more things to talk about.
I know, but so give them time to.
Yeah, if you have questions, please post them here in the group. Welcome, everyone. Anything that we talked about right now, up until now. Wanted to talk about why we have such a hard time with boundaries. You know, what is it about us as human beings that it's such a popular thing?
Such a challenge.
It's such a challenge for all of us. And it's because of this wonderful thing called the psyche that creates a persona. And early on in life, we are in this family environment that tells us what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And we kind of create a mask that we wear to interact with the world. And we have our internal world, but then there's this personality that people know us as, you know, the nice one, the generous one, the happy one, the fun one. And so we have this personality that we end up fooling ourselves thinking that's all who we are, is this persona. And what happens when we're facing someone who is crossing over our boundaries is that persona has to crack in some way. And that persona has helped us survive. So if it's to be strong and I can do it attitude and I'm independent and, you know, I can take on anything persona, and then you have to ask someone for help, that would crack the veneer of that persona, and you would have to basically bring in what Jung called the opposite, would be the shadow. So for example, the shadow of that would be someone who's vulnerable. And then here's the social part. The judgment socially is that that's weak. If you have to ask for something, someone for someone, you're in a lower position. And so we tend to think that boundaries are us lowering our position versus increasing our power.
Yeah, that's a good point. Going back to what we're talking about, how children feel safer when there are clear boundaries. As adults, it's the same situation. We feel more comfortable around someone who has very definite boundaries, even if we don't like them, because you know what to expect from that person.
Yes.
When they don't set the boundary and you're not sure where the boundary is, you're always having to guess and you're always on edge because you're not sure how the person's going to react to your responses or to what you're saying. And so that's a principle to keep in mind, is that the more clearly you define your boundaries with people, the smoother the relationships will be, the more comfortable people will be around you.
And the reason why we have that ambivalence, it's called like an ambivalent style, is because we don't know where the lines are. So we kind of test out and we don't know who we are. So we tend to morph into what we think the other person wants. And it's all based on assumption. And so a lot of times, like men I would coach for women, they wouldn't know, they wouldn't want to like ask the woman or get closer with her, but they were afraid. And then the woman perceived the man being distant or not interested, and it had nothing to do with that. It was like two people assuming. And so what we really want to do is we want to see what is the fear that you have to face when you ask for what you want. Like, what is that really deeper fear? There's also, like, people have a fear of confrontation because we talked about, because we're going to get yelled at, or people are going to leave us, we're going to be rejected, we're going to be abandoned. But also this guilt. You know, I found recently, actually today, we were doing boundary calls, so I said, of course it comes up, someone asked me to do something or assumed I would do something. And I said, and I was like, oh, that's kind of odd that she requested that. And then I had to say no. because that's not something I felt comfortable doing. And I remember I was sitting with you, Rob, and I was saying, it's so weird. I feel a little guilty. Like, should I have? Am I a bad person? You know, is she mad? And so your mind is really going, am I going to be kicked out of the tribe because I stood for what I wanted? And it really is a good exercise, because the best thing you can do for other people is do what you want to do. And the worst thing you can do is go along with their plan, because a lot of times you're just enabling them with bad behavior. And when you set boundaries for other people, you give them permission to keep their boundaries. Yeah. And so I always say, I'm not saying no to you, I'm saying yes for me. So it was a really good kind of experience today of feeling that, wow, I have to, you know, it still comes up. And so this idea that you can get rid of the guilt, that you can get rid of the fear, it's always going to feel uncomfortable. We're programmed to get along and to be nice. It's just part of us. You can't reprogram that. But the more aware we are of it, and the more willing we are to step into the fire, and that is really where the work comes in. And so let's talk a little bit about like integrating that fear. How would you?
Well, first of all, any emotion that comes up, especially the strong emotions like fear of confrontation or fear of rejection or abandonment, they're giving us an opportunity, and even guilt, they're giving us an opportunity to grow. Mm-hmm. And the emotional work is really powerful. Jung says that without emotion, there's no transformation. They provide, these emotions provide the energy, the fuel for growth, for personal growth. So there are always opportunities. I mean, nobody likes confrontation, nobody likes guilt, nobody likes to feel those powerful emotions. But keep in mind, they're giving you an opportunity to grow. But you have to approach them in a certain way. So here's some guidelines. Let's say, when you feel anger or resentment, or you find yourself whining or complaining.
Why are you looking at me?
You probably need to set a boundary, right? It's time to do a little bit of work. And keep in mind, it's an opportunity. So that the approach is, okay, here's an emotion coming up. I feel triggered by this situation. Approach it as an opportunity to grow, right? You're going to push the boundaries of your capabilities, your emotional strengths and all that. And
there's another one too, is that a lot of people, and I've heard this before, but it's so powerful, that no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
And I'm the most guilty person of doing this, is over explaining why I'm doing something a certain way, and like that kind of make it, kind of smooth it. Like we tend to want to smooth it out. So this is why I can't go to brunch with you, or I'll tell the toll taker we'll go through a toll in New Jersey, and I'll be telling them, oh, and this is why we don't have enough change, and we're giving you 4 quarters, and he's like, they don't care. I just explain everything to everyone, or like if I don't have enough money for a tip, I'll say, we're going to get back, and we just didn't have a chance to go to the ATM, and we just have that natural ability. And here's the thing, you guys. It makes you a great person. Like, you're a good person, you're a kind person, and you're probably well liked by a lot of people. But it comes with that kind of double-edged sword, is you may end up going over them too nice. There's like a diminishing return. And so you don't want to get rid of that part of you. You don't want to be turned into like a hard-nosed biatch, but you do want to have that strong, powerful expression. So saying no and holding yourself back, say as little words as possible, and saying it clearly and firmly. A lot of times someone will say to me, well, I told him that this is what I wanted, but he keeps doing it. And I said, did you tell him directly? Were you very clear? Well, I kind of like hinted at it, and I'm like, well, that's why you have to be clear, you have to be firm, and it's all about that directness. And here's the key, is that this directness is heart to heart. It goes right to the heart of the other person. They know who you are. When you're dancing around, you're just in that persona, and you're not really letting anyone close to you. It's really a defense. And we think being nice is making people like us, but people don't know us if we're being nice and not really being ourselves. And say the kindest thing you can do for someone is to be true to yourself, because that gives them permission. be like, wow, look at Debbie stood up for herself. I'm going to be like her. She says no to that person. I could do that too. You're empowering other people instead of just smoothing out. It's like spoiling a child, right? You spoil a child and it doesn't really help them in the long run.
Right. And part of the reason we feel uncomfortable setting boundaries is that we think we're being aggressive. But there's a difference between being assertive and being aggressive. Mm-hmm. Being assertive is you can do things in a calm, rational, kind of methodical way without getting angry or justifying yourself or apologizing for doing it. You're just simply stating what you need, what your wants and needs are in that situation. And to do it that way, it's perfectly acceptable by most people. Most people, I guarantee you, will not react in a negative way if you do it that way. Mm-hmm. If you wait until it's so uncomfortable that you have to blow up and then you have to react in anger or frustration, then that's when it becomes a problem.
Or you can let it go, you let it go, you let it go, you let it go, and then like 3 months later you're saying, about 3 months ago, like this has been bugging me. Like, why didn't you tell me sooner? It kind of feels like you've been like lying to them. Like, so it has that yucky feeling of, this has been bugging you for months and you've been pretending it's okay. So you really want to nip it in the bud. And so first I'm going to have 2 exercises. The first one is the emotion that you talked about, is that you want to just sit with the emotion that feels uncomfortable. And you don't want to push it away. You don't want to heal it or clear it. You want to just be with it, because it's really that, it's that defense. It's the edge of your comfort zone that you're with. You don't want to get rid of it. You want to go toward it. You want to face it. And you just watch the ego. It's that little narrator in your head just spinning the story about how terrible it's going to be and they're going to hate you. And you're just going to watch the story and be like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And then eventually you're going to see that it's just story. It's just an assumption. It's not true. And the feeling may still be there. And you go ahead and actually take the action by stating the boundary or having that confrontation. And what happens is the feeling will transform into power. It'll feel this more like a surge of power. It'll feel different. And you won't be like, it's like, I think of the shadow as this beach ball that you put under the water. And you're kind of holding it down, and all these emotions, you're kind of like keeping them, the fear at bay, but you're really not doing anything with it. You're just stuffing them. And, a lot of people that want to get rid of emotions, what they're doing is actually repressing them into the unconscious. And so when you bring it up, you can see it and you can know what it is. You see its edges, but you can still navigate around it. You can say, okay, okay, beach ball, I see this uncomfortable feeling. I'm still going to go, even though that feeling's there. And that's real power. And then that feeling or that part of you, that defense, isn't going to stop you the next time. It's not going to scare you again. It may scare you a little bit the next time, and then the next time it's going to be easier and easier. And then eventually that old trick, the ego trick, won't play into anymore.
Yeah. So these kind of ideas about boundaries, they may seem simple, but they're really at the core of our personal growth and development. As we approach them in this way, in this, remember we're approaching them as opportunities for our growth, they really become a way for us to experience relationships at a deeper level and to experience our power in relationships, and not just react to situations, but really start to create them creatively with our mind. Because the way we approach situations, meaning the mindset that we bring to them, is what we're going to get from them. You can think of the world as a mirror. It's simply reflecting back your own mind. Mm-hmm. So these situations that come up, they're reflecting something unconscious in you. They're giving you a chance to make that part of your mind conscious. And so they're really useful.
And so I'm going to give you an opportunity to set some boundaries. And this is a really wonderful exercise. It's, common exercise. You may have done this before, but I just absolutely love it. And it's called your tolerations list. And so you take a piece of paper, get your journal out, And I want you to write down all the things that you're tolerating right now in your life. And it could be big things like, I really don't like where I'm living. I really don't like my job. I don't like my relationship. I don't like, my car. I don't like my body, whatever it is that you're tolerating. It's just kind of like something, your bills, your debt, things you want to do that you feel stuck in. And then the little things like, I really hate the way my bathroom is, or that I don't make my bed every day, or that, I don't have the premium channels on my cable, like all these little things that you're tolerating. Maybe not having nice clothes, or, and then little things like not going to the gym or making time for yoga, letting my boss talk to me in a negative way, or letting Betty at the office keep taking credit for my stuff. Like, or her little snide remarks in the coffee room, what are you tolerating? And then I want you to just write them all down. And then I want you to categorize them into 3. Like, A is like the super big things that if you took action and shifted that, it would make a huge shift in your life. And they may take longer to do. So it's not like you can just call up someone and change a career in a day. You could, but maybe that's not what you want to do in a rash way. And then B is kind of medium things that may take like a month to do. Maybe like, I'm going to look for a new car, and I'm going to decide I'm going to get a new car. And then A and C are the little tiny things. Like the little C things are like the little things. They're not going to make a huge difference, but collectively, if you could check them off really quickly. And so you just say, I'm going to commit to doing like one of these a week. I'm going to, set my goal, make one big toleration. Like, I really am not going to tolerate this career anymore. I'm not going to tolerate, my boss anymore. I'm not going to tolerate the way my mother treats me, or, having to pay for my sister, Sally, because she can't get a job and I'm tolerating it.
Poor sister.
Oh, Sally. But, like the big things, and then you just kind of go through it. But the C list should be pretty easy to do. So if it's make my bed every day, or, I haven't bought a new toothbrush in a while, little tiny things that, you can fix right away, like today or tomorrow. And it could be just making a quick phone call for someone. I've been I've been tolerating not calling my best friend. I've been letting my work get in the way, and I'm not tolerating that anymore. I want to build stronger relationships, or I'm not tolerating not dating. I'm going to sign up for, Bumble or Match.com this afternoon because I'm not tolerating it anymore. And you just kind of start, every time you do it, it's like all this energy starts to get released. And you start saying yes to me, yes to me, yes to me. And that really starts building up your power.
Nice.
And then when you have to confront someone with the toleration, that's really where you can get this work that we talked about tonight to use with the emotion and asking for what you want. And then you just notice, like, is this that facade that you want people to think of you? Are you afraid to distort that? Are you afraid for people to look at you differently? And that's truly why we don't speak up.
Awesome.
So anything else to add, Rob?
Just go for it. Everything boils down to practice. You can learn all these things till you're blue in the face, but if you don't practice them, they don't do any good. So, write the list and start checking them off. Go with the simplest, start with the simplest, and work your way up.
Yeah, and the little ones at C, give yourself every day, do something on C at least. But it's really good to have them written out. I mean, when I did it, I was like, wow.
You had a long list?
I had a long list. You were half of them. No, just kidding. But it was really interesting how it's like a way to take your power back. Because if you don't make it an intention, you end up just pushing it aside. And one day I'll handle this. And what you're doing is you're taking back the reins of your life. You're being more conscious in the world, and you're being the force of nature to connect and direct your life in a powerful way. So I hope you enjoyed our little class. We're going to be starting next week. If you have questions, please post them. Let's see. Okay, here's one. The man I'm dating constantly crosses my boundaries. He disappears for days, but then when he calls me, I can't keep my boundaries because I want to be with him all the time, and I'm afraid of him rejecting me if I say no. Do you suggest letting him go or work with my mind to change my relationship with him? Well, he's reflecting your mind, right?
Yeah.
So he's reflecting your lack of boundaries, and your fear of rejection. That's what he's reflecting. So what you need to work with is the fear of rejection. Why are you so afraid of rejection? Like, what is that about? Now, your ego's going to say, oh, well, because I don't want to be alone and I really like him and he's attractive. But I want you to spend some time just thinking about that question, is what is so bad about rejection? Like, what's the root? What's underneath it? It has nothing to do with him. It's something much deeper. And it's not like a deep wound. I don't want you to go there. But I want you to think about, it's a misperception that your mind has made about the world is rejection. Rejection is not actually real. It's a misperception. So I'm not going to give you the answer because I like you. It's really good when you kind of find your own answer. So, but please post. We'll be checking your comments and helping you out with this. But I want you to sit with those of you who are afraid of rejection. Do that exercise. What is so bad about rejection? Like, take the guy and the people out of it, being single out of it, like really question that idea.
Yeah. Can I add just something to that? Because it's a juicy one.
A juicy one, and I'll read the next one.
For the first thing, like we were saying, is look at it as an opportunity, right? Here's your chance to change the pattern. Mm-hmm. If you don't take this opportunity, it'll simply repeat. Mm-hmm. Like whatever you decide to do with him, it will repeat somehow. So take the opportunity and approach it and observe your emotions right there, that like she was saying, and they'll start to change. The pattern will begin to change.
And when you're putting him on a pedestal, and anytime you put someone on a pedestal, you're making their needs more important than yours. And you're not really helping him either, because you're enabling bad behavior. You're telling him it's okay by taking him back every time. Mm-hmm. He's unconsciously thinking there's no problem. And so that's what I think. Definitely work on the rejection and then speak and ask for what you want. And then you're clear. You know, I had this in dating once. I had a similar situation, and I asked the person, I said, you know, I'm looking for a relationship. I'm looking for a commitment. And I'm not sure, you don't ask me on a weekend sometimes, and I'm not sure like where we stand. And I'm getting other opportunities to go out with other people. So I just didn't know where we were. And he said, well, you know, I'm not looking for anything serious. And I said, great, we could be friends. And it was so easy. And I was like, wow, that was easy. I should have done this 10 years ago. But it's like not being afraid to ask for what you want, and not being afraid of them saying, I can't give that to you. And then you can move on and find someone who can give you what you want. It's beautiful. But as long as you tolerate it, you're going to keep it. It's like the universe is saying, well, I guess this is what she wants. So let's just keep giving this same type of person. You'll move on, and then that same person, another guy, will do the same thing. Here's another question. I'll let you take this one, Rob. In my past relationship, I was cheated on several times. It was a relationship where my self-esteem was always on the floor, and I became a very insecure person. Now with my current partner, we have many problems because I always feel and think that he would do the same thing. And no matter how much I try, I always live with that fear. What can I do to recover that security in me and stop overthinking about everything all the time?
Right. So you can do a mental exercise. Ask yourself, what would be the worst case scenario to come out of that current relationship right now, the one you're in right now? What would be absolutely the worst? And remember, it's a mental exercise, so you're just kind of imagining what would be the worst. And the tendency, you know, in our mind is to not want to go there, right? We don't want to think about the worst, but we're doing it in a non-attached way, meaning we're not judging it. We're just observing the story that comes up in the mind as we do this. And so think about what would be the worst case scenario and observe what your mind creates. Then ask yourself, what is so bad about that? You know, what is it? Because what we want to do here is we want to get to what's underneath the fear. And it's hidden. In other words, it's not necessarily in the story that the ego will create. Like if you say, well, the worst thing that will happen is that he'll leave. And
or he'll cheat again.
Yeah, or that he'll cheat again and I'll be heartbroken. there's something underneath that. There's like a deeper fear underneath that, and that's what you want to get to. That's the unconscious fear right there. And that unconscious fear is what creates these situations. Once we get at them, once we make those conscious, they cannot create the same pattern anymore. So that's why it's an opportunity.
Well, it's like what we talk about in Jungian psychology, it's the projection. Like you're projecting your past relationship onto this person who's a different person, and you're basically assuming that he's just like that. But also, I want to just say one thing before we can move on to the next question. Because someone cheats on you has nothing to do with your value. It has to do with their value. It has nothing to do with your value. The way someone else treats you has nothing to do with your value. It's only your perception that you will, if you continue to allow them to treat you that way, then that's your own self-value. But someone who cheats, he doesn't cheat on you because you're not good enough. He doesn't, and you shouldn't ever, if they leave or they cheat or they, do something, go off and find someone else, that's about them. That has nothing to do with your value. And so we have to own our value regardless if someone rejects us, someone abandons us, someone likes us, someone doesn't. We don't increase our value. My value isn't increased because Rob loves me now. I had to bring love to our relationship. I had to bring my own value to that relationship. So we have to really kind of find it within ourselves. And I know that's cliche, right? That you got to love yourself first. But as long as you're gauging that other person and their behavior to your value, you're giving your power away. So that's really a great way to look at that too. People do that with money too. They give money power. That when the bank account's high, then I feel good. When the bank account's low, then I feel bad. And my value is based on what someone pays me, if I get a raise, if I have a title. So we do this with everything in life. We value the external, and really our internal dictates what the external is. Never let the external dictate what your internal is.
Wise words.
Wise words. Okay, here's another question. My boss frequently pulls people into her office and addresses problems, but she completely misunderstands the issue, and she's trying to micromanage people that are really good at what they do. And anytime I have to deal with her, it's triggering. She seems paranoid and has trust issues. A group of us are in regular contact complaining to her boss, but she's only gotten more micromanaging.
Now, again, this is a great opportunity. These people are our best friends, but you have to approach it from that perspective. You have to see her as your best friend because she's giving you a big opportunity to grow yourself. In other words, we could not grow without these people that push back, right? They confront us in a sense that they force us to look at, what is the situation pulling from me? What is the emotion that comes up in you? Is it frustration? Is it anger? Is it, oh, I hate this person? Whatever it is, move towards that emotion. Open it up. The answer is in the emotion. That trigger is there for you to learn a great lesson, not about them, but about you. So think about it that way.
And in love, if someone's micromanaging, a lot of times we get triggered because we feel like someone's trying to control us and we don't have freedom. And I tell you that one of the biggest obstacles to love for everyone that I've ever worked with was always about control, about feeling controlled. So I want you to get a sense of that feeling that you have about your boss. And I want you to ask yourself, have you ever felt that in a relationship, romantically? Can you see the connection and the pattern? When someone's really nice to you and they want to go out with you all the time and they want to treat you really well, are you feeling that kind of stifling feeling of, like they're trying to micromanage my life? And so it's something really, she's showing you a part of how you relate. Now she has her own stuff, her projections and her not feeling good enough. And that's why she does what she does. It has nothing to do with the people. It's her stuff. But if you're in that environment, your piece of the puzzle is matching up with her. There's something there for you too. So that's always, it's easy to get in your corner and talk about her and say she's bad. but what's in it for you? And I guarantee you, I've seen this happen before, is that when you finally get it and understand like what your fear is, she stops doing it, or you won't notice, and everyone else will be complaining about her still, and you'll be like, yeah, that doesn't bother me anymore. I got to what it is. And so it really is funny. And then she'll act like a different person around you. It'll be like bizarro world.
So this is a part of shadow work.
Mm-hmm. We're going to go into that next week.
Yeah, these people show us an aspect of our shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we know it's about us? Because it's triggering us. It's pulling something in us. It's triggering an emotion. Now, a lot of people misunderstand the shadow. They think, well, does that mean that I'm micromanager? I'm the micromanager, or I want to be that? Not necessarily, but it means that you're afraid of that.
Mm-hmm.
That you're afraid of being perceived as a micromanager, and therefore it's coming up in the situation.
Oh yeah.
So Jung says something like this: the internal conflict that we have becomes an external conflict. Meaning we get to see it out there in the situation, but it's really a reflection of our own dynamic, our own conflict.
And maybe it's about you not, like the trust issues and stuff, maybe there's something there for you about, like, and then a lot of times people get triggered by people that are bold. If they're not bold, they're afraid to be bold or direct. And, you know, this person's very harsh. I wish I could just say what I feel. So really look at a little bit of like what, and another question to ask is, what if I could secretly be like her? Like what would be the benefit in my life? If I could be like her a little bit, like a spoonful of her, like where could I apply that in my life where it would actually be empowering? And it may sound like a crazy question, but just think about it, and I'm sure we'll hear from you in the group, and as we unfold everything, and you're going to see a lot of how that pattern plays out. Great. Those people that trigger us, I'm telling you, they're the best. They're going to give you so much. I know it feels so awkward and terrible in the moment, and you just like want to curse them, but it will, after a while, you'll say, I love this person. Thank you so much for being such a pain in my butt, because I really got something really big. There's something bigger for you than just her falling into line that you're going to get out of this. And it's not about getting a new job. It could be, but it's probably not.
All right.
Anyway, great call. We went a little over today. Juicy topic. We will see you. We're going to be in and out of the Facebook group this weekend. And then we start on Monday at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. I don't know what the times are overseas, but you can go to timeconverter.com and it'll convert the times wherever you are in the world. And we're going to start with our first class from ordinary to extraordinary love and success. So we're going to talk about purpose. We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about living your outside of the bounds of what your limits were before, and give you some breakthroughs next week, every night. And remember, we'll also put the replays here in this group, so you'll have them. And the group will be open till September 7th. So you'll be able to see the replays the next week after. So make sure you listen to them, because they're going to go away in a couple weeks. So, but feel free to interact with us, say hello, ask us questions, don't be shy. We're here to support you, both Rob and I, and we're really excited to take you on this journey to having that divine love and purpose in your life.
All right. See you next time.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.